So maybe you've been to the beach, maybe this summer, and you're like, how do I solve this problem? Kathleen Hudson, what is the problem and what are you going to give us as a solution today?
Yes, we are looking at backlit waves. So how to do sunlight getting away from the backside.
All right, so you're going to show us how to make that wave glow.
Yes, when sunlight comes through spray, it really kicks up a bright glow. And so I will be demonstrating how to get that effect in your oil painting.
All right, so part of that is the whole idea of painting waves. Now, from what I understand, you look at a wave kind of like you would the roof of a house, right? If there's a flat surface, that's getting the most light. If there's an angled surface, it's getting the second most light. If it's a straight up and down, it's getting the least amount of light. So you're going to show us how to do some waves as part of this?
Yes, we'll be looking, you can see in the underpainting I have, the focal area of this painting is this wave breaking on a rock. And so we will look up close at how to get that effect. At sunrise, the sun's angle actually changes that balance. So you're looking at the sun coming from here and it's actually going through the wave and kicking up a lot of bright, light value in the spray. So that's a really significant part of painting early or late in the day when the sun is doing a little bit of a different thing than you see midday.
Well, that makes total sense. All of a sudden,
Yeah,
that's like a window. It's like coming through a window.
it is.
Okay, and tell me about your underpainting real quickly.
Yes, I underpaint in usually two tones. I use ultramarine blue and transparent red oxide, both Michael Harding paints. And together those make a neutral. I tend to skew it a little bit towards the transparent red oxide because I tend to paint cool. So I find that if I paint a little bit warmer in my underpainting, then it balances out as I'm applying the subsequent layers. But I can even, in my underpainting, because I have a warm and a cool color, I can use the cool in places in my reference photo, where I see more cool light, like in the shadow sides of the clouds up here. I leave it warm over here, except for some shadows that are, this is all going to be ocean spray. And so it's a really light white value, but because it's in shadow, it's going to take on the blue color of the sky overhead. So I use my underpainting to sort of key in some of those, to not only put values on, but also to try to infuse some warmth and to indicate where some of the warm and cool tones are going to be in the painting.
Now, you were just working before we went on air. You were just working on your underpainting, and so it's wet, right?
It is. I paint on a wet underpainting, and I find that if I keep it thin enough, then it's not a problem as I'm applying subsequent paint layers, because I don't scrub paint in when I'm applying, the regular consistency paint. I really try to load my brush up enough that it doesn't actually impact the underpainting at all. And there might be areas where I can drag a brush stroke into part of the underpainting and create some interesting transparent effects, but it shouldn't bleed through. Basically, if you are loading up your brush with enough paint, we're always trying to get people to use more paint. If you're loading it up enough, then it won't be a problem to have an underpainting that is a little bit wet. As long as your surface doesn't have walnut oil or Gamsol or whatever you use actually liquid on it, then you should be fine.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what, you get set up and we're gonna go to the opening and then we'll be right back.
Wonderful.
It's Art School Live with Eric Rhodes. Now, here's your host, Eric Rhodes.
Welcome to Art School Live. We're here every day at 12 noon since pandemic began and 5 days a week. If you want to subscribe to this program, please do. We'd always appreciate it. You can just go to YouTube and subscribe there. Just look for Art School Live. And of course, follow on all of your favorite social media as Eric Rhodes. That would be really helpful. Our guest today is Kathleen Hudson, who is a rock star painter. We're very honored to have her. We got to her very early, and she produces some incredible videos with us. She did, her first was, I think, Waterfall Secrets. She's done Oh, and I think her first was creating dramatic atmosphere and landscapes and clouds and distance. Anyway, she's done a number of them, but she's incredible. You're going to get a chance to know her, see how she works. And today she's going to talk about getting that light through the waves. And she's really good with water. As a matter of fact, I was struggling painting waterfalls the other day, and I thought, I got to rewatch that video because she's really good at it. We have a prize today. If you leave a comment in the comments section, you have a chance to win this book, Make More Money Selling Your Art. Just any comment. Tell us where you're from, etc. That's good. And the winner of our last prize is Ken Harrison from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, who won the incredible value specs that help you see values. And we have a free gift for anybody watching, 97 Incredible Art Secrets. It's a video. It's 5 hours, 50 top artists. It's like a demo video of some of the incredible stuff that we've been able to produce. And it's yours for free. Now, if you want the DVD, you can pay the shipping, but otherwise you can stream it instantly at 97artsecrets.com. Now let's get back to Kathleen Hudson. She's all set up. Are you ready to go?
Absolutely.
Take it away.
Okay, let me make sure the screen is even. I moved the tripod a little bit. There we go. Okay, so we've got a 12 by 24 canvas. This is oil prime linen. It's the Centurion oil prime linen that's available from Jerry's Artorama. And I find that that's a good service. Like, it covers really quickly, so it's great for plein air painting. And I have noticed that being able to cover pretty quickly keeps me from overworking passages when I'm out on location. So for demonstration purposes, it's also great. Sometimes when I'm doing bigger studio work, I'll get a more textured linen and try to make that give the surface a little bit more interesting texture when I have time to do multiple layers. So I'll start, I've got some colors mixed on my palette already. I like to pre-mix most of my paint. And I do that because it lets me approach the process of making brush strokes with a lot more freedom. I feel like I have a lot more fun when I can, when I can really focus on playing around with the brush stroke. So I'll start by doing this. There's a highlight on this wave where the sun's hitting it. The sun is actually off the side of the canvas. It's over here. That's a little bit unusual in terms of a composition choice, but I thought it works with this because there's so much contrast here with this wave catching the sunlight that your eye isn't immediately drawn off the side of the canvas. This is really where the area of focus is. So this reference photo is from Maui. It's from the north shore of Maui at a little stop off where there's actually a really interesting geographical feature where the lava rock has worn through in one section. So there's a hole in the rock. And sometimes when a wave hits just right, it sends a geyser up. And it's called the Nakalele blowhole. And they have to have warning signs all over it because people get way too close. And if you do, you run the risk of, if you slip, then you can get sucked back down when the water goes back down the blowhole. And that would be a pretty difficult
ugly
thing
death.
Yeah, not the way to go. But yeah, so this is, as I was painting this, I did a painting the same size roughly when I was there in 2019 for the Maui Plein Air Painting Invitational. And I got to hear tourists encountering the Nakalele blowhole all day. And it, every few minutes it would make this massive whooshing sound. And a couple times I actually got wet. But that was behind me. There was a really interesting section of coastline where you could see subsequent layers of the coastline jutting out. And I love that effect, especially when you have a lot of atmosphere in the morning. So there were clouds that were moving back over the shoreline. And then with the sun on this side, it really created this dramatic contrast between the dark layers in the foreground. So that's, the rocks that are closest to us have less atmosphere in between. And then as there are these subsequent layers of shoreline jutting out, they pick up more atmosphere in between. And so you can really create this atmospheric stair step pattern. So here with this wave, I'll paint the focal area first. How you choose the process of painting is really up to you. You can paint the whole where you would block in big shapes all over the canvas, or you can choose to paint the focal area and hit some of those highlights. I like hitting highlights early on just so I can create everything else around it. And if I've got my value underpainting to begin with, it's not a problem to go ahead and do some lights. Now in my reference photo, there's a really strong highlight that goes off the edge of the canvas down here. That's not something that I want to paint in a painted version. If I do a highlight, I want it to be up closer to this focal area, and then I'll create a little bit less contrast as I'm coming down to the end of the canvas. If you create a dramatic contrast right on the edge of a canvas, it's going to detract from the composition as a whole. It's going to draw attention and not in a place you want it. You want the viewer's attention on your painting to center, in that focal area and to stay there for a little while. So here there's a little bit of a highlight there. I really love using Indian yellow. I use that quite a bit when I'm creating highlights on water, especially because you can paint, here, this is an opaque titanium white, and it's just pure titanium white. And I can pull that up. And then if I take a little bit of Indian yellow over it with a flat brush, I've just got a very thin bit of it. You can see right there. If I carry that right up and over the white, it kind of creates a luminous glow.
So why not just mix it into the white?
Because when light travels onto a painting, it actually creates this translucent glow when you paint transparent over an opaque. And that's why watercolor really glows. That's why the Hudson River School paintings, where they used a lot of glazing, why those paintings feel like they have this luminous quality. And if you use transparent pigments like Indian yellow, you can actually do that even with a painting that's created alla prima, in one sitting. And that's something I really enjoy. I enjoy thinking about which of my pigments are transparent, which of them can pull off some of these effects, precisely because I can get some of that glowy feeling to a painting, even if it's not done in multiple sessions. So I'll hit some of those highlights back here, carry this up beside that rock. Once I've got a handle on some of the basic highlights, I can go through and create the shadow side, which will really bring up the contrast between the sunlight hitting these waves from this side and then the shadow cast on the other side of the waves. And there's going to be a lot of blue in the shadow sides. Now, it's one thing you want to be mindful of is that sometimes when you see contrast, the color contrast in something, it's tempting to go ahead and pull the blue right from the palette, to think, okay, well, since this is a white wave, or like what if you think of surf as being white, then you can make the mistake of just kind of tinting your paint as very, very slightly with color as you lay it down, but there's so much gray. So be mindful that you're not overdoing the color. I mixed a color that looks pretty gray to me, but I think I'm still pulling in a little too much blue. So I'm going to pull in more of a neutral here. And I'll keep stepping back to make sure I've got this dark enough. That's another thing. It's the shadow sides of a wave, even if it's foam, and so it has a really light local color. It looks, it can look white in sunlight. If it's in shadow, it's going to be picking up a lot darker value than the highlights are. And you want that shift to be pretty dramatic because this is the focal area. So I'm stepping back and making sure I've got it dark enough. I could probably stand to darken it a little bit further. Here we go. And when I lay down brush strokes, I'm trying to load up my paint anew each time and just put something down and let it sit. If I need to go back and change something, if there's a stroke that's out of place, then I can always do that. But I don't want to be scrubbing things in or getting too fussy or outlining rocks from the jump, because that will make this painting less interesting. It'll kind of kill the life out of the brushwork.
So lay it down, leave it alone.
Yes, lay it down, leave it alone. Resist the urge to keep going back in and changing things. There's always time to reevaluate later, and you can make, you can even make some big adjustments if you need to later on, but you want to make those decisions very consciously. And if you find yourself sort of, noodling around like that with paint early on, then you are probably not doing each of those brush strokes with intention. You want every brush stroke to have a purpose. There are some really good exercises you can do if you find that that's a hard thing to bear in mind when you're painting in the studio or out on location. And one of my favorites is to have students do a painting, it can be a small painting, and have them count their brush strokes and do a limited number. So you're only allowed to do, 40 brush strokes on an 8x10 or something. And just having some practice like that can really help change your mentality around brushwork, because it becomes something that you do with a lot more intention. If you have limited brush strokes, you have to think about it. And where you'll run into trouble is if you aren't thinking about it. You're thinking, it's hard to think of everything at once, right? So if you're thinking about your values and your color, then it's hard to also think about brushwork. That's why I separate things out into stages where I think about value first, and that's the value underpainting. It's all transparent, and I don't have any heavy brushwork in that. I just sort of scrubbed transparent paint in different values. And so all I had to think about at that stage was value. Now, I don't really have to think about value as much, because when I'm laying something down, I'm laying it down and it's a similar value to the underpainting. So those decisions have already been made. And it takes some of the challenge out of the equation if you make things easier for yourself by isolating your decision making as much as possible. So I really do enjoy having that value underpainting there, just so those decisions have already been made. So I'll keep stepping back every so often, make sure I'm getting the values right. I squint. I might have pushed it a little dark, but it could work. I'll see. I'll lighten it in some places here. So I have pre-mixed paint over here. I can snap a photo of the palette afterwards and post that on Facebook for those of you, or I'll post a link in YouTube as well.
Maybe at the end you can show your palette. We'll point your camera.
Oh, good thought. Okay, yeah, let's do that. So yeah, that way you all can see what I was working from. Hopefully a lot of that paint will be gone, but I should be using as much of it as I can. And then there's another area right here where the water comes in behind this outcropping of rock. And it even catches a little light. It's going to be a little bit lighter back there. So I'll pull in a lighter blue-gray that I had mixed. So I'm trying to...
Also, lighter and bluer is going to make it recede.
It is. Yes, the darkest darks are going to be the shadow sides of rocks down here in the foreground, and things will tend to get lighter as they move back into space. And it's a great way of creating what's called atmospheric perspective. And there is a lot of atmosphere in this reference photo. Feel free to do a painting from it. It's one that I enjoyed using a lot. It's actually a video still. That's something that I encourage people to do if you are painting, you're painting a seascape and want to get some reference for a studio painting. Don't just get stills. You can, of course, get some stills, but I would recommend getting some video as well, because you can do some amazing things just by, pausing a video or even watching a short clip of a wave breaking. Because when you paint, it is all about movement, and a still photo is going to take the movement out of the equation. So when I'm painting this, I'm thinking about the shapes of the waves as they break. Here I try to use my brush and carry it in the same direction as the wave. So here I carried it up because the wave was breaking on that rock, and here the angle of the brush stroke also it echoes the way that the water's moving. Same thing here. I'm pulling brush strokes down because that's that's the angle formed by this wave as it was breaking. So that's a pretty easy way of giving your oceanscapes a feeling of both life and accuracy. So there's some warm, kind of a warm green, almost with some brown undertones in the ocean right there. The overall light is going to have such a huge impact on the tone of your painting. So the light here is so warm because it's early, it's right after sunrise. A lot of these planes are illuminated, but because it's such a warm light, it's going to give everything a warm cast. That means even these grays over here that actually they look pretty bright blue, but they are gray. They're just because they're next to warm tones with the underpainting and with some of these warm wave highlights, they look a lot more blue than they are. And I was doing a series of waterfall paintings last year. I noticed that my palette at the end of the day would just look like a big puddle of different grays. And it didn't look as colorful as the painting that I had on the easel, but it's all about what, it's all about juxtaposition. So what color is next to what, and different grays can end up being really colorful if you have them in the right place on the canvas. There's so much gray in nature that's very true to life. So I'll get some of these warm tones over here. There's a lot more yellow here. It's, the underpainting looks more brown because I didn't use a yellow pigment, but I can bring in, I'm using some yellow ochre and white, and I might pull a little bit of Indian yellow into that just to amp up the saturation. Yellow ochre is sort of a cheat color for me. It's one that I can mix with my existing palette, but there's so much of it in nature that I like having it. It's a bit of a shortcut to have it on the palette. So I'll look at, there's a bit of a highlight right here. And there's one more highlight here that I'll have to pick up some more paint from. Don't want to get stingy on paint here.
One thing to pay attention to is that notice how the values, even the light values where she's putting highlights in, are not anywhere close to the light values on her highlighted area.
Yes, that is true. You really want to preserve those highlights for where you need them the most. There might end up being a white up here that is close in value to that highlight, but because it's going to be such a subtle gradient shift from dark to light in the sky, this isn't going to immediately draw your eye like that is. Your eye is drawn to contrast. That's what your eye finds interesting. And so you want to be intentional about where you create areas of contrast in your painting. So those are some highlights on waves that I can go in with my slightly grayer yellow, just mixed yellow ochre, ivory black, and white. And the ivory black mixed in with that is actually going to make it look a little bit green. I probably need to darken the value a little. It's going to make it look green next to the existing yellows on there.
I want to say hello to some viewers. Yorkshire, United Kingdom, Netherlands, Guatemala, Italy, Indonesia, Samelta Island, the Midlands of Ireland, St. John's, New Brunswick, and Loretta Berg Sampson is watching in her RV as she drives from Alaska to Oregon. I hope she's got somebody else driving. Just saying.
That sounds like an adventure.
Yeah. Speaking of adventure, we should talk at some point about the big adventure that you've embarked on.
Oh, yes. Yes, I am really, really amazed at the outpouring of support. So about a day or so after the fire that took down most of Lahaina in Maui, which is the closest town to this spot that I'm painting today, some friends and I were talking about it. We were texting back and forth, and I had posted something kind of brief on Facebook. I was planning on recreating a painting that was lost in the fire in a gallery in Lahaina, and I thought, well, maybe I can live stream the process of painting it, and then I can auction it off and donate to one of the charities on the ground in Maui. And then after a couple of friends texted and also wanted to do something similar, including Heather Burton, I remembered that Larry Moore put together an auction on an online auction site right after Hurricane Michael devastated the Gulf Coast of Florida. And I think about 300 artists donated paintings, and they were able to raise about 120,000 for for the folks in Florida who had hosted a plein air event that a lot of us have been to, the Forgotten Coast plein air event. And so there was just this massive outpouring of support after that. And I thought, well, there are so many people who love Lahaina, love Maui, have spent time there, know people there. It's just it's a welcoming place. The people are so full of aloha, of welcome, and it's a place that's heavily impacted lots and lots of artists over the years. And so I thought, well, I think if the one for Hurricane Michael was able to raise so much support, I'm sure we could do something similar for Maui. And the response was even bigger than I could have anticipated. We had 1,000 paintings submitted by more than 800 artists. We had $1 million of work valued that was submitted to this auction. So I ended up having to set up a website for it, and we really, it took off because of the artist response. People were more than happy to help and were incredibly generous.
So the auction is live now. The auction went live on Friday. We did a surprise announcement on Friday. The auction is live, and then we're doing a streamathon this coming Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern. And we're trying to get as many people as possible to watch the streamathon so that we can raise money. You don't have to bid in the auction if you can't, but maybe you can give $5 or $10 here and there. Anyway, we're going to do it all on Friday, this coming Friday at 3 p.m. And I will be co-hosting along with Kathleen, along with John Burton, and along with Heather Burton. They're not related, surprisingly. Heather Burton Santillanes.
Yes, and we are really thrilled that Streamline came alongside and that that you're joining us for this, because I think it's going to be a great way of highlighting the voices of people who are there on the ground. We have a lot of people from Lahaina lined up to share with us, and we have other artists who are from parts of Maui. We have musicians who live in Maui, and I think it's going to be really special because for a lot of folks, they didn't want to be interviewed by the mainstream news, because of course all the questions are about the fire and what everyone's experience was of that, and it was deeply traumatic. A lot of people understandably don't want to spend a lot of time reliving that, but what we'll be able to ask about is what the art community in Lahaina means to them, what how people have been displaying a really strong sense of community and helping each other since the fire. I was really amazed. I think I talked to a woman who works at an art center in Maui, and they are sending artists into hotels to give art lessons to people who are displaced. And they were doing that within the first week and a half after the fire. They had already, they were boots on the ground right away, just making sure that people felt cared for and had an outlet, and something that felt, that could take their minds off of the trauma of what they had just experienced. So that, we'll be hearing from that organization. We'll be hearing from a woman who spent years working with the Lahaina Art Society, and they play a big role in the community. They do free art lessons for kids, and they likewise are going and teaching for kids who have been displaced. So it's going to be really, really valuable to hear directly from these people in a way that you really couldn't outside of something like this, because because it's not the type of thing that you would see on the mainstream news.
We also have a lot of very well-known artists who are going to be participating.
That is true. We have some big names who donated paintings, and you'll recognize them from videos you've watched, possibly from one of the conventions you've attended. And so we'll have a whole mix of things too. Some people will be showing quick demonstrations of painting techniques. Some will be doing studio tours. Some will be painting on location. So it's going to be a big mix of things to just to show everyone how deeply supported Lahaina is, and to point folks towards the auction so that you can go support Lahaina by buying a painting.
So mark your calendar. It's Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, 1 p.m. Mountain, 12 p.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Hawaii time. And go to artstreamathon.com and sign up, and you'll get notifications when it goes live. artstreamathon.com.
Yes, and the auction is, of course, already running, as Eric mentioned, and so you can go to artistsforlahaina.com and you'll find information about it. You'll find information about where the proceeds are going, which is they're going to Maui Pono Foundation. That's a new foundation that was created by Lahaina residents after the fire, and so they are in very close contact with us about where funds are going. They're letting us, we'll of course give some to direct aid because people are still very much in need of support after the fires. Lots of people were displaced because 80% of the structures in Lahaina burned. But we also want to designate some funds for the support of Lahaina's arts community, because that's something that often gets kind of passed over. And when the government is handing out aid, or when insurance companies are responding to a tragedy. And that's such a big part of Lahaina's culture that we want to make sure that the arts community is supported.
I'm just going to show some of the artists. There's over 1,000 paintings, but here's one from Josh Clare, Bill Farnsworth, Susan Deal, Jim Morgan. Me in situ has a couple paintings in there. Joseph McGurl, Ned Mueller, Sherry McGraw, Josh Elliott, Ray Roberts. There's a whole lot of them. So make sure you get in there and bid. Tell us the website again for that.
Yes, it is artistsforlahaina.com.
LAHAINA.com.
Yes, and so don't miss seeing that auction, because it's a really impressive body of work too. There with 1,000 paintings. The bidding is already reached over 170,000 in support for Lahaina, and all the proceeds are going to Lahaina. So it's really, it feels like a gift to be able to be part of this movement, and realize how amazingly loving and generous our community of artists is. It's pretty special.
Yeah, it's worth going in and looking around, and there's a chance that you could end up with a painting you otherwise might not be able to afford. In some cases, some incredible artists in there.
That is true. Yeah, it's a really amazing collection of work. I feel lucky to be in the auction. That's what I was thinking as I was uploading all of these pieces. That it's not only is it a really compelling cause, but it's just an amazing show of work. And there are wonderful paintings in all 3 auction pages that you can go find.
Not every painting is a Maui painting. There are other paintings in there as well.
That's true. There's a lot of figurative work. There's some still life work. There are paintings from southwestern locations. There are paintings from the Rockies, East Coast. I mean, there's everything, because the artists who submitted paintings are from all over. There were some artists from Australia who submitted, so it's not even just a U.S. thing. So I think that's another great reason to go check it out, just because there's such a huge range of work represented. We left the submissions open to anyone as well. So we wanted to make sure that anyone who wanted to support Lahaina could submit a painting and work with us. And so we got paintings from all over, and that's been a really cool thing about this show, because it's pretty rare that you would see any kind of show in otherwise that had work by some of these huge name artists, but then also work from everybody. And I think it's a real show of support for Maui, that there is such a huge range of prices represented, and people from all sorts of backgrounds. I didn't actually write down an age limit on the submission form, and so we found out that one of the paintings was submitted by a 9-year-old. So it's actually pretty moving that
I love it.
That people, yeah, I know, right? So yeah, people from all over.
So there's a question about your underpainting in here. The colors
Yes.
you used for your underpainting are?
Yes, so the underpainting is mostly transparent red oxide, and then you'll also see ultramarine blue. So I've mixed the two. If you mix them in about equal measure, you come up with a fairly neutral transparent color. But in some places I've scrubbed in, you can see a more blue tone. In some places there's a lot more transparent red oxide, and that just has to do with the relative warmth and coolness of those those shapes in my reference photo. So I'm stepping back a lot, trying to look at what I'm creating. Now that I've got a lot of these different tones blocked in, it might be a good time to go in and then focus on my focal area here, which is that wave breaking over rock.
I'll tell you what, let's do that. I'm going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll do that. All right?
Sounds great.
All right. Our guest today is Kathleen Hudson, and Kathleen is the primary organizer of Artists in Lahaina. She's doing it with John Burton and Heather Burton Santianas. And the 4 of us are going to be hosting the Streamathon. The Streamathon is going to be on Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern. You can figure it out. Just go to artstreamathon.com. And we are devoting 3 of our days this week to artists from that. So this week we'll have John Burton and Heather Burton Santillanos with us as well. Kathleen is the guinea pig. She gets to do it today. And we'll be back with her in a minute. And remember, there's some incredible pieces in the auction, and you want to go there and look for them. Just go to artistforlahaina.com, LAHAINA.com. All right. So what else is going on? There's a lot going on, man. There is so much. First off, I want to tell you about this. We started Realism Live with the pandemic, and everybody said, keep it going. And that's because, quite frankly, a lot of people don't want to travel or don't have the money to travel and don't want to have to pay for a hotel room. So have an incredible lineup this year. And quite frankly, just hearing Bert Silverman talk about his career and his ideas on painting is going to be worth it. But there's so much more. So join us for Realism Live, November 9 through 11. And if you can't make the dates, you can do it on replay, right? If you can't go in person, you can still get the replay. The replays are extremely valuable, and you want to make sure to get that at realismlive.com. I'm taking a group of people on October 20th to Stockholm and Madrid. I was communicating with an artist there this morning that we're going to be visiting, and very excited about our behind-the-scenes trip to these two beautiful cities. Just go with us. It's going to be fun. finearttrip.com. And I'm going to be taking a group to Japan. We have a wait list. It's sold out, but we do think we're going to be able to squeeze in a couple more rooms. We're waiting to find out, but you got to be on the wait list, because at the last minute when we do, you got to be willing to go. We're going to be painting all around Japan. It's going to be spectacular. So that's at plenairjapan.com. A reminder, we're here every weekday at 12 noon. You can subscribe on YouTube at Art School Live. Just look it up and hit the subscribe button, and that little bell right there, that little bell notifies you when we go live. Speaking of live, now we're back to Kathleen Hudson. Okay, Kathleen.
Hi there. So yes, you can see that during the break, I did a little bit of work on the sky. You know, I want to save this for you all since that's the focus of what we're talking about today, but I did want to go ahead and key in the sky. Sometimes it changes the overall look of the painting when the sky is more polished. And so then I'm making decisions down here with reference to what's going on in the sky. The sky also affects the overall lighting of the scene. So having that in a little bit more of a final form early on is helpful for me. One thing you'll notice here is that some of these gray blues in the sky are pretty much equivalent to what you'll see down here. I'll squint at my reference photo and make sure that's accurate. And you know, it works out well because it harmonizes. It makes me extra glad that I devoted the time to pre-mix and paint, because I can just pull that right off the palette, and then you know the paint that I have down here is the same color up here, and it does give the overall painting a stronger sense of unity. So that's always worthwhile. This sky gets pretty dark up here. We're looking at a reference image from North Maui. And it's a little bit on the, so we're looking, you know, obviously towards the east, towards the sunrise. I did a 24 by 48 version of this reference image, and that painting is currently on display at a gallery in Carmel, California. So if you're nearby, you can see the big version in person.
Which one would that be?
It is the Edward Montgomery Fine Art Gallery. And so, yeah, they have that there. It was featured in the California Art Club Gold Medal show a couple of years ago. And I just love this reference image. It's one that I mentioned about 15 minutes ago that it's one that I got as a still from a video. And I love doing video because you never quite know how a wave's going to break. And, you know, if you look at 100 waves, they're making 100 different shapes.
So you can pick the exact spot, the exact time you want, and still.
Exactly. Yeah, you can kind of find the most dramatic portion of a wave break. And it's kind of fun to be out there on location painting it, because you can borrow elements of different waves that you see roll in. And then if you hear, you can almost tell when the big ones are going to come, because they usually come in series. And you can, you know, grab your camera if you're like me, and try to capture some of those more dramatic big breakers.
So will you leave some of those brown tones in, or are we going to replace them?
You know, where the rocks are, I think I did leave some transparent passages. Oops, sorry for bumping it there. I did leave some transparent passages in the big studio version I did of this piece. And I like doing that, especially where you've got really warm undertones and some darks. You know, leaving the darks transparent can keep some of the life in a painting. So I do try to make sure that happens.
Hello, Istanbul. Welcome.
It's fun that this is such a global array of artists watching.
Yep. I can't read this one. Le Cosato Vino Frizzante from Valladolid. I can't read it. Sorry.
So yeah, finalizing some of these skies over here. This is yellow ochre. I think I could actually push the chroma a little bit more, the saturation. So instead of yellow ochre, I'm going to pull in a little bit of Indian yellow. It's one of my favorite colors on the palette. This one really does vary by brand, and there's some brands that have a vivid Indian yellow, but the brightest that I found is Michael Harding's, and you can actually use it in place of cadmiums, which is helpful both from an expense standpoint and because I have small children who like to get into my studio.
One time when my kids were little, I went out to my studio. I had a bunch of powdered pigments.
Oh, no.
And one of the kids had gotten into a very toxic powdered pigment, and it was all over him and all over everything.
Oh, no.
So,
yeah, that's a sinking feeling.
Yeah.
My son came to visit me at my studio back when I lived in Kentucky and had a studio that was outside the household. And I didn't actually know that he and my mom were going to drop by. And the first sign I had of him being present, I had headphones on, was I reached down to get some paint on my brush, and there was a tiny hand in the middle of the palette on the paint. I thought, oh gosh. So yeah, we had to clean him up in a hurry. But yes, never a dull moment with kids running around.
By the way, it never ends.
I'm sure.
Yeah,
noticed
you
that
guys
with
can
my-
believe this. I mean, Kathleen is juggling a family, an art career, and she's doing this auction and streamathon. You are a superstar.
Well, it does. It helps to have such a compelling reason to put an auction like this together. You know, I of course have put a lot of my painting on the back burner for the time being, but that's something I can pick up right away and get back to afterwards. It's going to be a lot harder for the folks in Maui to pick up after the fact. I was talking with a friend on Friday about that, and you know, hearing some of his experience. And it was remarkable to me because he wasn't, you know, even though he lost a huge amount of his inventory, he lost most of his art supplies, you know, not to mention friends and, you know, lots of his community that he grew up in. But he was already talking about, he's already going back and teaching tennis lessons to kids, and he's already talking about giving art lessons to kids. And this is a painter who is, you know, is extremely experienced, you know, sells work for thousands of dollars and loves teaching kids. And you don't find people like that all the time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's really amazing to know some of these folks who are impacted.
So we've got about 4 minutes, Kathleen.
Oh, okay. Better get back to the wave.
Get back to that wave.
I love getting distracted by skies. You can tell I really enjoy painting skies. So with this wave, I might put a zoomed in image of the reference photo at the end. I can zoom in for you guys on what I'm painting. But
well, I have the reference
you got
photo
it.
on the
Okay,
screen.
great. So you can see right here as the sun hits this wave. I've already got the wave highlight in, and I can change some of it, but it's not going to need a whole lot. But right here, oftentimes you'll see a really bright chroma. So whatever the color is of the wave, and Maui, you know, picks up this kind of bright blue-green tone, that will be present in an area where the sun's hitting it. So if you're, you know, and of course it changes. If I were standing here and looking towards the sun, I'd be looking directly through, like the wave was a window, and I'd be seeing a lot more of this green chroma. Since I'm looking through the side, what I'm seeing more of is the sunlight hitting the wave and catching mist. So, but there is going to be a section of this green, you know, this kind of bright green chroma that's a little too dark. So I'm going to come back with my yellow and lighten it. But you're going to be seeing a little bit of that right where the sun is hitting, because it catches some of those local colors in the water. And you want to be selective about that. If I take that green and I start applying it everywhere, it will ruin the effect. Like it won't stand out anymore at all. So that's one thing I want to really drive home when I'm talking about bright color chroma. It's the same story as with value. You want to reserve your darkest darks and your lightest lights for specific places on the canvas. You don't want to put it everywhere, because then it reduces the power.
So point out where your darkest dark is. I think we know where your lightest light is. It would be right next to it.
So the darkest
right?
dark is actually, it is in the foreground here, but because there's so much of it and it's next to another, you know, dark to mid-tone, it's not going to draw the eye as much. The strongest contrast between dark to light is going to be in that focal area, and that's intentional. You know, I tend to try to pick things to paint that have a strong contrast. So it's going to be this dark rock, which I can go ahead and darken a little bit further. I'm actually going to pull some more blue into it because it's got it's in shadow and it's got some spray around it. So I'll see if it looks good blue first. If you look at the reference photo, that is the biggest point of contrast in the whole image. And so I'll paint it like that. You know, I might change the values a little bit, because one thing you'll notice when you're using reference photos is that it changes the value range a little bit. It'll make things that are not fully white look white. It'll make things that are not fully black, look black. It kind of expands the value range. And in real life, you notice that there's still color to things, even if they're a really dark value. And so I'm thinking about that as I'm painting this rock and as I'm doing the wave highlights. And I'm going to give them a little bit of a color boost over what I see in the reference photo. I also do a lot of editing with my reference photos. So when I'm working, when I'm thinking about what to paint, I spend quite a bit of time in Photoshop adjusting things, compressing the value range. I'll darken highlights and lighten shadows. And I encourage you to play around a lot with different photo adjustment settings, just so that you can understand how darkening or lightening different parts of a photo will affect the overall impression you get, because the same is true when you're painting.
Nancy Holliday says, wouldn't it be great to own one of Kathleen's paintings? I want to remind everybody that Kathleen's work is in the auction, Artist for Lahaina, and just go to artistforlahaina.com and you can look at them and you can bid on them. And I want to remind everybody that we have Art Streamathon on Friday at 3 p.m. Just go to artstreamathon.com right now and sign up and you'll be notified. And this week we have the 3 artists who are really organizing this, who will be on with us live this week.
I'm really thankful that you all made that free too, so that people could all be a part of it.
Yep, it's free. But we will employ guilt.
Yes, we want people to give joyfully, though, because that when you'll hear directly from a lot of the folks who are going to benefit from the auction, and I think it'll be a really motivating thing, because
the stories.
Yeah. Yes, these folks are really, really compelling. They're wonderful members of their community, and I feel nothing but warmth for them and a strong desire to help them out.
Kathleen, I need you to come back on camera. We're going to wrap it up.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
So there's that wave highlight. So yeah, and when you step back, it actually
looks great.
And look at it in reverse. It's off to a good start.
Yeah, it looks really.
I can show you real quickly the paintings that I have in the auction if you'd like.
Oh yeah,
to see
okay,
them.
quickly, yes.
Yeah, so here's one. This is the same exact location, if you can kind of see the similarity, but this is in the middle of the day, and you can see here. This is another example of light coming through waves, but it's what Eric was talking about at the beginning of the show, where the sun is overhead. So you're seeing a really different highlight on the form. You're seeing a lot more of that local color with the turquoise. So this is a 20 by 20 painting that is, I think the current bid is $1,500 on it, and it's got a value of over $4,000. So you could,
a bargain.
Yeah, you could go put a bid in or keep an eye on it. And here's my second painting, which is also a 20 by 20, obviously in oceanscape as well. I had a lot of fun doing the foam on this one. Let me try to zoom in a little bit for you guys. So yeah, the foam is fun to do because I painted the overall white color of the water, and then I came in with the sort of teal color and a filbert brush and created some of those holes in the foam to make some of that lacy stuff. But yeah, it's always a fun challenge to solve with sea foam.
Well, outstanding. Well, Kathleen, thank you so much. I'm going to have to roll because the show time is up. But Thank you so much. I will remind people to watch the Art Streamathon on Friday, artstreamathon.com. Kathleen, thanks for all you do, and thanks for putting this together today. I want to remind people that Kathleen also has a series of fabulous videos out, and if I can find them, I'll show them to you. One of them, most recently, Waterfall Secrets, And all of these are at painttube.tv. She also has Creating Dramatic Atmosphere and Landscapes, Waterfall Secrets, and Clouds and Distance. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you so much for joining.
All right. Bye-bye. All right. Well, thanks to Kathleen and thanks to her and her colleagues for all the work they're doing. We'll see you on the Streamathon on Friday at 3 o'clock. I'm Eric Rhodes, and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.